you may have realised, we had one or two technical problems, but we are live with you now. Thank you to all members and members of this committee for attending, and also anyone who may be watching on our live streamed YouTube channel. Can I have any apologies for absence, Mr. Wheeler?
Yes, Chair, Councillor Willie Samuel.
Thank you. And any appointment of any substitutes?
Yes, Chair, Councillor John O'Shea for Councillor Willie Samuel.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And we also welcome today Councillor Ray Glindon, who is here as Cabinet Member for Finance. Can I remind members to declare any interests or dispensations or anything that may appear within the agenda today, and disclose those to Paul. Councillor Oliver, if you could unmute.
I'm trying to. Thank you, Chair. I took part in the subgroup Children's Readiness for School, and also on page 4 of the supplement we were sent, the autism strategy. I have a family member with autism.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Paul Wheeler will take note of that. Thank you very much indeed. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January 2021?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Councillor Oliver, do you have anything else you want to say? Because you've still got your hand up. No, thank you. If we move on to item 5, the Children and Young People's Plan for 2021-25, to consider our new plan for the borough to cover those 4-year period. I thought we were having Mark Jupp with us, but I'm not quite sure whether we have today. I can't quite see. Could you advise, please, Paul?
Mark isn't in the room, Chair, but Kevin Burns and Kirsty, we're calling Kirsty Parsons as well, but Kevin Burns is in the room.
Okay then, thank you. So we received this paper in the courier yesterday. I'm sure members will have read this paper. Has anybody got any questions, or would you like the officers to go through? Councillor Allen.
Hello, Chair. I have a couple of questions about the report. The first one is, there's no mention of talking to anybody in the northwest part of the borough, and being a Camperdown councillor, I'm obviously keen to understand what's going on.
Thank you. Can Kevin answer that?
Sorry, are you talking about the Children's Readiness for School report?
No, we're on the Children and Young People's Plan.
Okay.
Good evening. Sorry, could I just confirm which part of the report you'd like me to comment on? Because there's a discussion about a variety of ways in which people have been involved. I'm not quite sure which the council's referring to in terms of the Northwest.
Councillor Allen, can you clarify to Kevin Burns?
Sorry, I'm having to use my mobile because my laptop won't let us log in for some strange reason.
We've had some issues, yes, I know.
But I've only got one report that I can see.
No, this is agenda item 5, the Children and Young People's Plan. Are you referring to the secondary report, the scrutiny report?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, okay, if you want to come back to that later then. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't know if we're going to go through this report on agenda item 5, but I was just interested in section 2, the neat young people. We've got a lot of percentages, but we haven't got any actual figures of how many young people that actually means, and that would mean a lot more to me to know how many young people are in North Tyneside who are neat, rather than a percentage. If we could have that, would be really helpful.
We can organise that, not a problem. We can get that to you.
Thank you.
Right, okay, you don't have that to hand. All right then. And Councillor Green.
My question's exactly the same. I noticed that we've only asked for proportions in some cases, but percentages don't mean an awful lot. Really, well, it does, but I would prefer the figures as well, the actual figures. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor OShea.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the same table at 2.2, and I'm just wondering if Mr. Burns could just explain if the North Tyneside figures are better than the England ones or not, because I cannot, I'm not quite certain which is better. Are you able to tell me that? I'm particularly interested in the second one down where we are 1.6%. The national England average is 3.6. Now, is higher better or lower better?
So
are you able to interpret that for me, please?
Of course I can. So for the second section, so that's where children and young people who are 16 and 17 don't know where they're going next.
Yes.
So nationally, 3.6 of them aren't clear on where they're going next, whereas in North Tyneside, it's only 1.6. That would be a positive figure.
That's a positive.
That's a good sign, because more of our young people know where.
Right. And similarly, the one below, we're a little bit ahead of the England one. Is that good or bad?
Yeah, so that one is a good one, because that one's where higher is good, because that's the number of children and young people who are in education, employment or training. So we're about, just around 2% higher than national.
Right,
So
and then
again,
the next,
that would be positive.
And the next one, 13% against 38.
Again, that's
good.
A positive one again.
Right, and the last one, 64 against 51.
Is again a positive, yeah.
Well, generally speaking, it looks as if we are significantly above the England average on most of them, apart from the top one there. Is that just because we're good at these issues, or is there any under a geographical thing or small numbers? Are you able to give a reason for that? Because they look exceptionally good, as I say, apart from the first one.
I think where we do well is the range of facilities that are available to our children and young people, but also we have a specific service called the Connections Team, who look to support and work with children and young people who are looking for their next stage and phase in education. So that team is heavily involved with families and with children and young people to help them identify the right destinations for them. So I suggest that having that capacity in the local authority is really useful.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for that explanation.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Oliver to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's just the bottom one on the first page. 16 to 24-year-olds were sent with destinations unknown. Why are they unknown?
There could be a variety of reasons for that. Sometimes when we collect the data, children and young people just aren't clear on what their next stage is or what they do want to do. So obviously what we've got to do is work with them, with their families, understand what their aspirations are, and then look to help support and match them into the next stage or phase of their education. Obviously we want everybody to be in employment, educational training, and the aim is to get everybody into that stage. So at that point, those young people are still making their minds up, still deciding where it is they want to go next. And also it may be that some courses are slightly later in starting, or some young people may be transitioning between 2 or 3 different courses. So there's a variety of reasons for that.
Thank you for your explanation. When you say you want all young people, it won't be possible for all young people, for those with a very severe learning disability.
Indeed. The aspiration is to try and get as many children and young people as possible into education, employment or training.
Thank you.
Can I ask Councillor Brian Burdis to come in, please? Brian, you're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. I've looked at the paper, but what concerns me is not so much the figures that we have here, but the strategy that we're going to take, given that we've had a year where children will not have been in contact with teachers or anyone else really on a regular basis. Now those needs and any future needs, they're just going to probably drop out of the system because they've not had that contact. Do we have a strategy to sort of like catch those people before they disappear into, well, wherever they disappear.
So particularly for our young people with additional needs and identified SEND, we've tried to maintain those contacts as far as we can. Again, services like the connection services and also the schools and settings that the young people are with currently in terms of their education have worked exceptionally hard to stay in touch with these children and young people. There are some vulnerable young people who've been quite difficult to reach, so we've looked at a cross-service approach, so across education, and also working with colleagues in social care as well to make sure, as far as possible, we've kept really close contact and good links with our families and good links with our children and young people, so we understand what their aspirations are and try to make sure we can keep that involvement and that engagement, so the majority of them will still go on to relevant and worthwhile purposeful education, employment and training. So there's the work ongoing over the past 12 months has been interrupted, but it hasn't stopped, and obviously we're working very closely across partnerships to try and maintain that and keep those numbers as positive as they are.
Councillor Karen.
Chair.
Oh, sorry, Brian.
Chair, I was just going to ask, has there been any change in the types of courses that these children can go on, these young people can go on to? Again, given that colleges haven't been available for the last year or so, and maybe there's been courses dropped or other issues. Just wondering if there's the availability of courses and other means for these children to actually come into education or come into work.
So we've not noticed a huge difference in terms of what's available. What we have noticed is perhaps some children and young people and their families are identifying the need to extend a course. So perhaps if a 2-year course was due to finish this year, they might look to extend that over 3, or perhaps if a course was coming to a natural end, they're looking for something that can help them just practice and refine those skills. So again, that's on a quite individualised basis, and again the connections team, the SEND support team are helping us with that to make sure we've got the best opportunities of keeping the children in employment, education and training. So what we're doing is very much kind of match the individual, but also trying to use the good connections and the good links that we've got with the families to try and make that work as best we can.
Is that everything, Brian? He's on
yes.
Thank you. Councillor Karen Clark. Karen, could I ask if you're speaking, could you put your cameras on, please?
I can. Yeah, can you see me? Sorry, I'm having to use my phone also, and I've been struggling with sound, so hopefully you can hear me okay. First of all, apologies, I do need to declare an interest in this item. I work for an organisation called Justice Prince Community Interest Company, and we're a partner with North Tyneside Council in delivering a programme called Working Roots, which is for neat young people aged 16 to 18 years living in the borough. I just wanted to say that programme has been phenomenally successful, and it offers 24 places, so that's quite a significant proportion. I appreciate we haven't got the numbers, but I know it is, or I believe it is, and it's been phenomenally successful. It's a full-time work-based education programme, and we've got really excellent progression routes, and we have managed to retain and maintain this service throughout the COVID pandemic. We did have a short spell when it was suspended on the first lockdown, and at the moment it's reduced in terms of the work-based side, and that's purely because of the vehicles that the young people and the supervisors travel around in. So for health and safety, that's been limited. But it has continued, and it's a really phenomenal programme. I just want to say the council, I feel, should be very proud of that in terms of what we're doing for young people. It makes a real difference to their lives. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, for sharing that. That's really helpful. Thank you. Mr. Stephen Fallon, if you could put your camera on, Stephen, that would be helpful too.
Hi. I also have got a declaration here. I'm a head teacher of a primary school in North Tyneside. And I just want to pick up the concern that Councillor Burdis made about children losing contact and losing ground. My experience at the moment, which I think leaves many vulnerable children increasingly vulnerable, is that the number of services who are reluctant or refuse to come into school at the moment to support the very children that need that help. So when schools are trying to meet the needs of children, we often rely on external agencies to provide support, guidance, and so on. And it's been a real mixed bag, particularly during this pandemic, where, you know, some agencies will not come in. And we brokered meetings with parents and children for assessments to take place, and agencies have said, no, we can't come in because of COVID. And I think that doesn't match the aspiration that when I come to these meetings, I hear councillors talking about their aspirations to make sure that the most vulnerable children, their needs are met, they're cared for, looked after. But the reality is, at the moment, it's not happening for me. And many of my colleagues are very frustrated at the fact that people can opt out in this. And it's the very children that stand to lose the most. And I'm wondering if, Kevin, I know that some agencies aren't under your remit, but what joined up thinking is going on here? Because there are children here whose lives are on hold. They're on pause at the moment, and it's not good enough.
I think, Stephen, we've tried to make it as a joint up approach as we possibly can. Obviously, different services come under different remits, as you've mentioned. So we've got some colleagues who work under a health remit, some colleagues who work under social care, and some who work under education. And the guidance for that has been quite different. So, for example, in some of our specialist schools, the expectation for health professionals working in schools has been entirely different to that of education. I think, you know, what we've tried to do is be as pragmatic as possible in getting the services to children and young people. And I appreciate and I hear what you're saying. If you've got specific examples of agencies or services that aren't able to come in at the moment, I'm happy to take those away and pick those up with the individual service leads. That would be useful. But I do know there's several teams who, you know, where schools are asking for it, they are working directly into schools and working directly with families and young people. So there's specific services. I'm more than happy to pick that up outside of the meeting.
I just think sometimes, you know, when you're looking at the lives of the most vulnerable young people, you can step outside the guidance, and it's not happening. And there is outreach work that's not taking place that, you know, we often rely on for some of our children. And you know, it's for me, it's looking forward. How on earth, what strategies putting in place when things do return to normal? Because these lives have been put on hold. How's that going to be, that ground made up? These are the children that stand to lose more than anybody else. And at the moment, to me, the joined up approach isn't there. And I think it's too easy for some agencies to step out of this. So that's my concern, that I'd like you to pursue that, please, because it's very frustrating on the ground.
Stephen, you've got my contact details. So if you can give me the specific services where you're seeing the most barriers, I can certainly pick that up.
Thank you.
Stephen, would you mind copying me into that email as Chair of Scrutiny? I would like to have a look at that, because I'm looking at some of the aspects of the education service tomorrow. So yeah. I wouldn't mind having a look at that as well. So because I will have some people in a room where I can talk. So
okay, thank you.
And I do thank you for raising that, because there are some children who will never recover from this, who are being disproportionately affected. Especially the most deprived children, and we need to do what we can quickly, because time doesn't stand still. So thank you for that, Stephen, very much. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. Oops. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. I'm moving on to 3.1. Kevin, we have got a figure here. It's 215 out of borough placements last year, a 20% increase on the previous year. Now that's an enormous increase, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of reasons for it, but I just wondered if you could give us some more detail, please.
Yeah, so there's excuse me, there's kind of two types of out-of-borough placement. If I think it's worthwhile just kind of explaining what the two different types are. We've got the majority of that 215, I think it's around 160, I can't give you the exact figure, are children and young people who are post 16. So maybe attending college in Newcastle or a college in Gateshead. So they've made a specific choice to go there. So the bulk of those places are at post 16. Where we have seen an increase pre-16, and as you can see, that is a 20% increase. At the same time, we've seen an increase of about 16% in terms of our education, health and care plans overall. So whilst it looks like that number has increased a huge amount, we're still looking at about 11-12% of our children and young people are going to bases outside of the borough. So whilst that is an increase, it's stayed just about in proportion with the number of children and young people who have got education, health and care plans. So we've got within that kind of 60 or so children who are in education settings that aren't at post 16. There's a group who go to schools within the locality. There's a group that go to schools that are right across the country, and that may include a residential aspect. And there's a smaller number of children with quite significant needs who get significant amounts of care that couldn't currently be provided in North Tyneside. So there's 3 different groups in that section. So there's quite a lot to look at. So that as a proportion of our education healthcare plans, it's increased ever so slightly. The majority of them are at post 16, but we have seen an increase in the kind of pre-16 ages, and they're mostly to children and young people who are attending a local private provider.
Thank you very much, Kevin. That's really helpful. It looks very different when you take the post 16 out. So thank you for that. It's still something to be very aware of, and it's something we're also keen to understand, because we want to keep all our children in our community. Absolutely. Though we'll always recognise there'll be sometimes that's not possible. Thank you.
Councillor Pat Oliver, did you want to come back in, Pat?
Yes, please, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Page 4.1, the autism strategy. I've already declared my interest. How big is your consultation group, and are you consulting with parents and carers of young people who are in supported living?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I couldn't give you an answer for that. Can I find out and get back to you? Is that okay?
Yeah, because I mean, certainly my family hasn't been contacted for any opinions. And I'm a little concerned that there's a cohort of young people who could be slipping through the net who aren't living at home, but nevertheless have severe autism and need support. And they're in supported living. So if you could look into that, that would be really helpful, because I don't want those young people to slip through any net.
Absolutely, of course.
Thank you.
And just to follow on from that, we look forward to the all age autism strategy partnership board meeting and reporting in the summer of 2021. Councillor OShea, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, yes, please. Mr. Burns, you may not have this information readily at hand, but the neat percentages we've got, behind that there will be actual youngsters in, and I'm just wondering, anecdotally, are you able to comment on how looked after children do as opposed to non-looked after children in the neat figures?
I haven't got those figures to hand, Councillor, so rather than guess, I'd rather check and make sure.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Burns. Thank you.
Mr. Fallon, did you have any further questions or update that you wanted to give, or is it just that you've still got your hand up?
Sorry, apologies, I've still got my hand up. Sorry.
Right. And the same for you, Pat. I think you just still have your hand up too. Does anybody else have any further questions? Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, and we look forward to receiving the rest of the information. Thank you for taking on the questions that you could. Anyway, thank you. And we move on to agenda item 6, Children's Readiness for School. And this is a report of the Children and Young People's subgroup, and I think Councillor Oliver, Councillor Thirlway and the Reverend Michael Vine served on this committee. Do we have Michael Vine with us this evening?
I don't believe so.
No, okay. Matthew, would you like to talk to this report?
Yes. This report was originally it originally sort of started to wrap up March last year. That's why it's been delayed so so long. But originally this report was sort of commissioned because a number of councillors raised concerns during committee meetings about articles in the media, you know, in the press, not about North Tyneside, but on a national level, about children who weren't ready for school, especially around toilet training, sort of dental health, where they were coming to school with rotten teeth. So obviously, you know, if you're not in good physical health, you know, you can't learn on day one. So there was initially, you know, quite a few concerns from committee members about actually, is this happening in North Tyneside? Is it a problem in North Tyneside? So the subgroup sort of came from that idea of actually checking if there was a serious problem in North Tyneside. And what we found is we don't really know. A lot of the big problem with this report is the lack of evidence. There was a lack of engagement from schools and from private nurseries about whether or not there is a problem, and if there is a problem, what is it and how big is it? So one of the recommendations in the report is actually asking the council to do further consultation and actually scoping this problem, because there is a problem, and I think the three members expected there to be problems, and it's not sort of unique to North Tyneside. You know, every local authority are going to have these problems, especially in very deprived areas. So we were expecting to find things, but due to the lack of evidence that we could actually gain from schools and private nurseries, actually trying to scope the problem still is quite difficult. So that's why we want the council to actually go out, engage with schools, engage with parents, all these stakeholders, and actually find out if there is a serious problem in North Tyneside. So that's basically the crux of the report. I'm happy to take any questions. I don't know if Pat wants to add anything else.
I'm getting here. I'm getting there. Right. I think Matthew will agree with me that we're actually a bit disappointed with the response, or the lack of response from schools in particular. I think, was it four schools responded?
4 or 5 engaged with us.
And it was actually very disappointing. And we understand that head teachers are busy, but it is an important issue, and it's actually to their benefit to identify these young people in any case and to see how big the problem actually is. So that was the reason why we couldn't draw any firm conclusions, because of the lack of feedback from schools.
Okay, I'll bring in Councillor Allen, because I think he wanted to ask something before. Jim, could you put your microphone and your camera on, please?
Just can't do that. Yeah, I want to raise what I nearly finished before, but I just wondered, in terms of getting schools to respond, is there not a bit of legislation that indicates that they have to either we can get them to appear in front of a scrutiny committee, or that they have to respond, provide that information? That was my first point, based on what
I'm not aware of any powers we have to force schools to actually sort of provide any evidence. That's all actually, I'm not aware.
But my understanding on the legislation for scrutiny is that we'll have powers as the scrutiny members or committees to make demands on people to either appear or provide the information.
I think that would have to be taken up with legal and governance.
Sorry, Matthew. Jim, can I ask you to turn off your microphone, because there's some really bad interference on the line there. Could you just turn your microphone off while you're not speaking?
Do you want me to answer that, Sandra? I'm happy to.
Yes, please. I'll ask Bryn Roberts to come in, or...
Yes. Well, I think I'm definitely under the impression that we don't have that power, that legal power to force anyone to provide any evidence, written or otherwise. But if you believe that's so, I would have to take that with legal and governance, because that would be news to me. So I don't know if Bryn wants to come in and clarify that.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst the committee does have certain powers in relation to council officers to require them to attend, that's not necessarily as broad as being able to require school head teachers to attend committee meetings. And obviously, the committee has to weigh up the benefits of trying to require an individual to attend and the value of the evidence that you would get as a result of somebody attending through compulsion rather than voluntarily.
Great, thanks, Bryn. Yeah, and I think I don't think there's any sort of power to actually require private, because half of the evidence should have come from private nurseries, and I don't think there's any sort of ability the council has to sort of force these people to provide evidence to a subgroup. But we got full engagement from council officers. We were really grateful to them. You know, they attended a number of sessions with us, and we got really useful feedback from council officers. So there was no issue with the actual council.
Is there anything further?
Go on to the second point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I just want to notice that was North Shield and I can't remember the other bit. There was no reference to any schools in the northwest part of the borough. Long Benton Road has both primary school and what would you call it, high school special provision too, that were in units. And I noticed you haven't engaged with them, or may haven't engaged with yourselves if it's not responded. Was there any other school in the northwest part of the borough that was approached? Or
every primary and middle school in the borough was contacted more than once. Like Pat said, the response was very poor from schools. So the chances are, Jim, is that the schools in that area didn't respond to our requests for evidence. We did contact every primary school and every middle school asking for evidence, and they just didn't respond. They didn't engage.
So is the reason timeout was then in North Shields in this report because schools in those areas responded?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Can we bring in Councillor OShea, please?
Yeah, fine. Right. Okay, Matthew, I'm just wondering, what's the status of this report? Is it the final report and that's it? Is it an interim report, or are you going to try again when COVID allows you to just try and further explore the issues and try and get some further collaboration from schools who didn't want to be involved in the consultation?
Yeah, that's a really good point, John. Like I say, we're quite disappointed with the response. That's why one of the recommendations is actually asking the council, the cabinet, to look further into this. That's essentially what we want. We want the council to go back to these schools, go back to these private nurseries, engage with parents and guardians, and actually find out, you know, where the problems are. Actually, is there a significant problem? Because we couldn't, you know, one of the fundamentals is there a big problem with this, and we couldn't answer that because of the lack of evidence. So we've asked one of the recommendations is asking the council to actually go out there and, you know, find out, because we couldn't. So we're asking the council to actually do further engagement.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Ord, could I ask you to come in and turn your camera on, please, Michelle?
Hi, okay. I just wondered who it was at the schools that the governing body, or if you're going in by the head, or whether you're going in by the school business manager?
I think emails were addressed to head teachers. I think it was sent, it was probably sent, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming it was sent to sort of the generic email address that the council possess. I think it went through like the education department in the council. We would have got the contact details from them, and it would be sent to the school. So it should have got to the right people, hopefully.
Okay, that's all I was wondering. Just in my experience in schools, sometimes, and you know, it can be something as simple as it sitting in someone's box who's not picked it up. Maybe if it goes to multiple people, or if you maybe send it to the chair of the governing bodies, it may help things. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah, I don't know the sort of
the
finer details, because that was done by the clerk of the committee, but it was chased up a few times.
Okay.
And so obviously some schools did come back.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillor Brian Burders.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I say, I think it was a good report. However, it was very concerning. Can you hear? I'm okay?
Yes.
It's a very concerning report. One of the things that it does highlight is that some of these children, with all those problems that they have, are going to be the children that will be the NEET children of the future. Now, although the report is about actual children, I think what it really says is the problem isn't so much with the children, it's with the parents. And these parents are, I suspect, likely to be a generational thing. Their parents before them haven't showed them, taught them potty training or whatever. So what strategy do you think we should be doing to actually, not so much for the children, but the parents of the children? What should we be doing for them to educate them, to teach them, to bring them in?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about it being a generational issue, and actually the big, role obviously parents play. And I think the thing we agreed on is that actually if you get, to children and you get to parents early as possible, that's when you get the best results. If you actually look at the evidence of children who go to nursery at a young age, they do so much better than their peers who don't go to nursery. So it's actually one of the huge things is actually getting children into nursery and ensuring they stay there, and actually ensuring nurseries engage with parents. And the nurseries we spoke to, there was a lot of engagement with parents, or there was a lot of attempts to engage with parents. Obviously, some parents don't want to engage with sort of, the nursery or the school or the council. And I think it's just about offering support, offering advice, trying to contact and help these people who are probably struggling. I don't think it's a malicious thing they're doing, but they're probably, a lot of them are struggling. And actually getting these people, as soon as possible. That's what we sort of discovered, especially around the nurseries, getting children into nurseries as soon as possible. So I hope that answers your question, Brian.
Yes, it answers the question, but I think what we need is a strategy within the local authority with the schools and with the nurseries to actually address the problem of the parents as well as the children. So I think we probably need to look at that, a report, in the future.
Yeah,
something of that area.
Well, like I say, one of the recommendations is actually to go back to the parents and go back to the nurseries and schools. So I think that's probably going to be a huge part of it, because I do know that speaking to officers, they are very keen to actually do preventative early help, because it's not only is it better for the child and the parents, but it saves the council money, and it's better for society. If you can nip these problems in the bud as soon as possible. So hopefully that's something the council will look at if they do the consultation with these parents and the schools and the nurseries.
Bring back sure start.
Yes, that did come up several times during the subgroup about Sure Start. Yes, that was definitely something.
The demise of Sure Start has a lot to answer for.
Yes.
Bring in Councillor Muriel Green, please.
Yes, thank you. The last comment was going to be my first. I just wondered, Matthew, given the problems that the schools have had, whether or not the timing was right to send it out, because the legislation, the relationship between the council and all schools is different now from what it used to be. And if there were sort of surveys coming through to head teachers, they'd get stacked in a pile, and you know, sometimes going through them for responding is not a good number. I agree with you, but I just wonder if you really thought that through on the timing of it and what really did you expect. But the issue about Sure Start is going to be resonating throughout the country, I think, and you know, we're desperately trying to get it back. It's one of the saddest things that we lost, one of the best things we had. So I just wondered if you thought if it was really the right time to send it out.
Well, it was the surveys were sent out before the pandemic.
Ah, right, okay.
But we did acknowledge in the subgroup that actually head teachers are very busy. You know, schools are very busy.
Yes. But it's such an important subject that I really do think you should go back to it. There's a lot of anecdotal comments that you know, have been passed on to me over the last year, and which clearly indicate to me that it's not really as effective as it should be in preparing children for school. Lots of things, and so really start again. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, I think it's something the council should, the cabinet should be looking at, because it demands more resources than we can provide as a subgroup, as a subcommittee. So I think this is really important for the cabinet to actually take and actually look at, because yes, the anecdotal evidence we received was very worrying, but to sort of get a whole picture of the problem, you know, it's going to take more resources to actually find these problems and then address them.
Thank you. Councillor Janet Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's just, I wasn't sure whether I ought to declare an interest or not. I'm Chair of Benton Dean Primary School Governors, and they were one of the schools who responded.
Well done.
I wasn't sure whether that was required, but I completely agree with what Matthew was saying. It is something that I think we need to look at long and hard now. This readiness for school was bad beforehand, but it's even worse now. We've got children who are in nursery and year one reception who don't know how to hold pens and pencils. So we're falling behind. Certain children are falling behind. So I think we really do need to look at it long and hard and put, you know, once this pandemic is over, children are back in school.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think it was in the report somewhere saying, you know, if one child isn't ready for school, then there's still work to do. You know, it's a continuous effort to actually ensure every child has a good start in life. I think Pat wanted to come in.
Could I bring Karen Clark in first?
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It is really interesting, and although I agree with people, it's really sad actually what the indicators are looking like. I just wanted to clarify that there were two schools from the northwest of the borough involved in Appendix 1, Benton Dean Primary School and Balliol Primary School. So it was just to highlight that. But just on the point you were just talking about, so while I agree it's a really important issue, I suppose I get, you know, I can sort of feel my heckles go, because I suppose it's about how we tackle it and what we do. And I think there's a need for a massive culture shift in terms of how we work with people and, you know, how we engage people in the process. And I appreciate it is, you know, an issue with resources. I'm not blaming schools and nurseries, because obviously they're under pressure and I haven't got the time. But there are ways of engaging successfully with parents, and I think, you know, getting the buy-in and basing services around how they see the problems and define their needs is the key. And for me, it's the only solution going forward, and it does demand a massive culture shift with officers, professionals. Everybody loves to tell parents what they should be doing, and I think we should be listening to parents themselves. Thank you.
That was actually one of the things that what I experienced during one of the evidence gathering sessions when we were speaking to social workers, because I had this concept, you know, how a social worker would speak and act towards a parent they had concerns about, and actually what they were saying, it is much more, I wouldn't say friendly, but there is collaboration between sort of the parent and the social worker. It's not what you would traditionally think of sort of social services. So I thought that was very encouraging, because I expected something very different. And I think there is that buy-in concept that the council does seem to be adopting. I think signs of safety was an element of that. But yeah, it was quite reassuring from the social workers. Actually, the way they interact and treat parents it's much more accommodating and sort of collaborative than what I would have thought. So that was actually really encouraging, Karen.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that, and I know it's not deliberate, but I think it is just this interface with social workers. You know, it's quite daunting. I think that people are worried about what the outcomes of that interaction and interface might be. I just think it's not a critique of people trying to do a brilliant job. It's not that at all. It's just, obviously, I'm 30 years in development work and social action programs, and it revolves around engaging the people. You know, there's that famous saying, I think, what is it? Anything about us without us isn't for us. So no one likes to be told what to do. It works much better if you really engage people and start to develop policies and processes around their experience that they deem to be appropriate and it's meaningful. That's all. So I think there's a big challenge for us all to actually achieve.
Definitely, there was a lot of discussion in the subgroup with officers and with other people about the way society's changing, the way society is, and the way society's changing. And it's not just sort of the council and the people it's supposed to help. Actually, it's, you know, how people interact with each other as a community, as a society. So Karen is right. It's a huge thing, and I think the council has to be on the ball.
Yeah, we have to be mindful that we're not doing to, but we're doing with people. Yeah. Michelle, did you want to come back in, or is it just you have your hand up? If not, I'll bring Councillor Oliver.
I must have just left it up. I'll take it.
All right, Councillor Oliver.
Thanks, Chair. Just to reassure Muriel that the subgroup started, it was either late December or early January, I think, long before we were aware of the word of lockdown, as Matthew said. The final session was the 16th, I think, of March, and also that schools were contacted twice. They didn't actually have to attend in person. What we asked for was a written report. So yeah, that was extremely disappointing. And Karen's point, there are some schools which are, there's one in Howden, Longbent and Shiremore who are engaging with parents. And it's not actually all deprived families where the issue is.
Yeah.
Some of them are, and I understand it. Both parents do work these days in a lot of cases. And you pick your kids up, you get them home, you get them ready for bed, etc. The day is not long enough sometimes for some parents. So as I say, it is mostly deprived areas, but not exclusively by any means. And I'm happy to go back, if Matthew is, when this is all over, and look at it again if that's what people feel is necessary, because it is a problem. And unless we address it now, it's only going to get worse. And yes, Sure Start was the answer to it all, but we don't have it now. So it was just to clarify those few points.
It's a shame you couldn't gather all that information, and because
we were all very, very disappointed about it. Yeah. And as I say, they were contacted more than once.
But you could have done no more. The subgroup have done their best, and we've all heard anecdotally about how some children can go to school and not use a knife, not be able to use a knife and fork, and all the rest of it. It's all about building confidence within the family and the children, so that people are engaged with and giving them resilience to go forward. So thank you for that report. Does anybody have any further comments or any questions? So this will go forward to see what Cabinet make of it and see whether they accept the recommendations as offered. And they may come back and ask you to do some more work. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for contributing to that. Is everybody happy for that to go forward? Yes?
Agreed.
Yep. Thank you. And just to say, our budget subgroup report went to Cabinet yesterday. I don't think there's anything further to add to that, and that the budget, barring any further, we have the provisional settlement from government. There will be a firm settlement sometime next week, I think it is. Janice Gillespie said, and then the final budget will be drawn up, ready to go to Cabinet on the go to Council on the 18th of February. Any further comments or questions? No. Well, I would like to thank you, Stephen Fallon. Thank you, Stephen.
Hi. Just on the idea of returning back to schools, to seek wider views or get a wider base of evidence. I would recommend that you do it differently instead of approaching schools individually. The minute you've got to submit things in writing, it takes time and it's difficult. We get inundated with requests for surveys and all manner of information gathering. I'm not trying to excuse or defend my colleagues here, but what I would say, there are better platforms to get a wider platform of views. You know, head teacher briefings, locality area meetings where head teachers meet. It can be quite easily put on the agenda there for them to talk through the questions for which you're seeking answers, and those views collated and forwarded back. It'd be much more efficient, and you get a much broader perspective of people's views on this. Just if you're going to go back to seek further views, I would think about doing it differently.
That's really helpful, Stephen. Thank you very much. I'm sure that Councillor Thirlaway and Councillor Oliver will take that on board, and may want to add an addendum into the report to that effect, to make Cabinet aware when this goes forward to Cabinet. So thank you for that, Stephen. And I'd just like to thank you all for attending tonight, and for a very full discussion on the items on the agenda, and wish you a safe journey home.